Christmas, my parents turned my 10-year-old away at their front door and told her she wasn't welcome without me. She had to walk home alone in the snow, arms dragging from the weight of every gift she'd bought with her own allowance, a Santa hat crooked on her head, trying not to cry so the neighbors wouldn't see. When she got to our little duplex and I opened the door, cheeks burning from the cold, she didn't burst into tears the way I expected. She just stood there, on the mat, snow melting off her boots, plastic shopping bags cutting into her fingers, the bright wrapping paper inside all cheery and stupid and wrong now, and said in this tiny, cracked voice, "Grandma said we're not family this year." Have you ever had fear hit you so hard it feels like your heart stops for a second? That deep, ugly fear a lot of single moms carry, that the people who are supposed to love your child unconditionally will use them as a weapon against you, that you're going to pass your own childhood hurt right along to your baby because you can't keep the people who raised you from hurting her too. I didn't even feel the cold from outside. I felt heat, this wave of rage that started somewhere near my spine and rolled up my neck. "What?" I heard myself say, but it came out thin, like my voice didn't fit in my mouth anymore. "Zoe, come in, you're freezing. What happened?" She stepped inside obediently, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space. 10 years old, already apologizing with her posture. She kicked her boots onto the mat, snowflakes scattering, the hem of her red coat soaked. The bag swung from her hands, the bright wrapping paper inside all cheery and stupid and wrong now. "I rang the bell," she began, eyes fixed on the floor. Grandma opened the door a little bit. She looked behind me and said, "Where is your mother?" I could hear my mother's voice in Zoe's mouth, sharp and clipped. "And what did you say?" I asked, my own voice shaking now for a different reason. "I said you were at home," Zoe whispered. "'Cause she told you not to come." Her lower lip trembled. Grandma made this face, like she scrunched her features into a perfect imitation of my mother's disgust. And she said, "Well, if your mother's not welcome, neither are you. We don't reward disrespect." Have you ever heard words you thought were reserved just for you, suddenly pointed at your child instead, and realized you've put them in the same firing line you barely survived? There was a ringing in my ears now. "And Grandpa?" I managed. "Was he there?" Zoe nodded, a quick little jerk. "He was behind her, in his sweater with the deer on it. He just turned around." Her shoulders hunched. "I told Grandma I brought presents." She held up the bags a little, as if to prove it. "I spent my allowance on them, remember? For you and Grandpa and Auntie Tasha and the baby." She looked at the bags and said, "Take your presents back where you came from." And then she closed the door. Closed the door. 3 words, like a spell I'd known my whole life and still thought somehow they'd never cast on my daughter. I made her sit down on the couch, pressed a blanket around her, even though it felt like my own skin had turned inside out. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. I'd given her that little phone myself, programmed my number, Alma's number, 911, taught her what to do if she ever felt unsafe. In my mind, unsafe was a stranger grabbing her arm in a parking lot. I'd never considered unsafe might look like her own grandmother in a cashmere sweater refusing to let her inside on Christmas Day. "I was gonna," she said, "but I didn't want Grandma to hear my phone. And then when the door closed, I just walked. I couldn't feel my fingers because the bags were heavy. Mrs. Patel from next door drove by and asked if I needed a ride, but I said no. I didn't want her to know Grandma didn't want me." Have you ever realized your child is already learning to protect the reputation of the people who hurt them, the same way you did? Shame shot through me so fast, I almost doubled over. Not shame about Zoe, shame about me. About the fact that I knew, on some level, I knew this was a risk. That the people who spent my entire life weaponizing love and withholding it to keep me in line might do the same to her. But I'd told myself, they're her grandparents. They'd never take it out on a child. I'd been wrong. "It's okay, Mom," Zoe said quickly when she saw my face. That killed me even more, that she was trying to comfort me. "We can still have Christmas, just us. I don't even want to go there if they're going to be mean." She tried to smile, but her eyes were too bright. Behind the brave tilt of her chin, I saw my 10-year-old self standing in a too-big holiday dress when my mother hissed in my ear, "Stop crying. People are watching. You're ruining the mood." No, not again. "Look at me," I said, crouching from front of her so we were eye level. "You did nothing wrong. Do you understand?" She sniffed, nodded a little. "But Grandma said—" "Grandma is wrong," I cut in, more sharply than I intended. I took a breath, softened my tone. Sometimes adults are wrong, even grandparents. Have you ever had to say that out loud after spending a lifetime believing that if your parents didn't approve of you, it meant you were broken? She chewed her lip. "Is she mad 'cause you didn't come?" she asked, whispering. "She said you were disrespectful and always causing drama. She said you chose to have a ghetto Christmas this year instead of a real one." There it was, the real target. Me. My choices. My refusal to continue playing the obedient daughter so they could have their perfect tableau. They just happened to use a child as the canvas this time. I felt my jaw clamp so hard it hurt. "Grandma can be mad at me all she wants," I said slowly. And that was how I knew I was truly, truly done. The version of me from 5 years ago would have already had my mother on the phone, voice at 11, rehashing every wound from my teenage years. We'd scream, she'd cry, my father would sigh in the background, we'd all hang up feeling vindicated and hollow, and nothing would change. "I'm going to make sure," I continued, "that they cannot ever pull something like this again without it costing them more than it costs us." Zoe frowned, trying to puzzle that out with a 10-year-old brain. "How?" I picked up my phone. For a second, my thumb hovered over Mom, then Dad. Then I scrolled further down, past old coworkers, daycare numbers, vet, all the way to the contact almost at the bottom. Great-Grandma Alma. A lot of families have that one person the rest of them forget is still dangerous because she's small and old and sweet. They don't realize she's the one with the original keys to the house, to the history, to the money. Have you ever spent your whole life watching your parents act like they're the top of the food chain, only to remember in a crisis that there's a shark they answer to as well? The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Who died?" she barked by way of greeting. Folks only call old people in a rush when somebody done died or done wrong. Despite everything, a laugh burst out of me, half hysterical. "Nobody died, Grandma, but somebody definitely did wrong." "Nina?" she said, voice sharpening. "Yeah, Grandma, and I'm here with Zoe." "Merry Christmas, baby," she said, instantly warmer. I could hear the TV in the background, some corny holiday movie, the same one she watches every year. "Why you sound like you chewin' glass?" I looked at Zoe. She looked back, eyes wide, as if sensing that this next part mattered. "Because," I said, "my parents just turned your great-grandbaby at their door." Silence. Then, in a voice so quiet it made the hairs on my arms stand up, Alma said, "Put her on the phone." I handed the phone to Zoe. "Great-Grandma wants to talk to you." Zoe swallowed, took it carefully. "Hi, Grandma." "Hey, sugar," Alma said, voice now dripping honey. "I hear you had a rough morning." Zoe's face crumpled just a little at the kindness. "Grandma, didn't she, she cut her off gently. "Take your time. I already know what them fools did. I want to hear how you feel." Tears spilled over now. Grandma said I wasn't welcome, blurted Zoe, 'cause Mommy wasn't coming. She shut the door. I had to walk home. Alma hummed, the sound vibrating with controlled fury. Listen to me, you hear? You didn't do anything wrong. I almost told her to watch the language, then decided 10 was old enough to hear a cuss word used in righteous defense instead of violence. Zoe hiccuped a laugh through her tears. Your mama is my grandbaby, Alma went on. You are my great-grandbaby. That means you're mine in a way nobody on this earth gets to argue with. Your grandpa and grandma, they said, they got real confused about where they came from. That's their mess, not yours. You always got a place to come where the door opens. You understand? Yes, ma'am, Zoe whispered. Good. Now put your mama back on the phone. I gotta make some grown folk phone calls. Zoe handed the phone back, wiping her face on her sleeve. She's mad, she whispered, a little awe mixed with fear. Good, I said. She's allowed. You still there? Grandma demanded when I lifted the phone. Yeah, Grandma, I said. My throat burned. I'm here. You bring that baby to my house, today, now. Y'all not spending Christmas in that empty little box while those two sit up there pretending they're God's favorite children. I'm putting on some macaroni. And while you're on the way, I'm calling Daniels. Daniels, my lawyer, she snapped. He'd been itching to make some changes anyway. Your mama and daddy like to forget who paying for that big house and those stupid reindeer in the yard. They need a reminder. Have you ever felt a rush of vindication and terror at the same time? Because finally, someone older and more powerful than your parents is on your side, and you know their wrath isn't going to be pretty. Grandma, you don't have to, I started. Hush, she said. I'm 92 years old, I do what pleases, and what pleases me right now is making sure nobody who slams a door in my great-grandbaby's face gets to keep living off my money like they're doing me a favor. She lowered her voice. You've been trying to be the bigger person with them for too long, Nina. Let an old woman be petty on your behalf for once. Now get in the car. She hung up before I could argue. Zoe watched me, eyes searching. What did she say? I said we're going to her house. She's making mac and cheese. And then? Zoe asked, sliding her arms back into her coat. And then, I said, opening the door to a world that suddenly felt a little less stacked against us, we're going to let great-grandma do what she does best. What's that? Remind people who they're really dealing with. Driving home to Alma's, I had one hand on the wheel and one hand clenched around the past so tight that my knuckles hurt more than my fingers did from the cold. Zoe was in the backseat humming some Christmas song under her breath, pretending everything was fine because kids are experts at survival. I was in the driver's seat, replaying my entire childhood in that house on the hill like a movie I hadn't asked to see again. Have you ever realized that one awful moment isn't really just one moment? It's every smaller hurt you swallowed before finally showing itself in a form you can't ignore. To understand why I didn't just shrug this off as, well, that's how they are, you have to know who they are. My parents didn't grow up rich. My mother came from a cramped apartment over on 12th, my dad from a shotgun house in the country with a front porch sagging under the weight of 3 generations. They worked hard. I'll never say they didn't. But somewhere along the way, we worked hard turned into we're better. When I was little, I didn't see it. I just saw the big Christmas tree, the new backpacks, the birthday parties with bouncy castles. I saw my mother in her pressed scrubs, my dad in his company polo with his name stitched over the heart. I heard them tell me over and over, we did all this so you didn't have to struggle like we did. Don't throw it away. What they meant was, don't choose anything we don't approve of. Have you ever been loved on a curve where the grade keeps changing depending on who's watching? By the time I was a teenager, I'd learned the rules. No raising your voice in public, no airing dirty laundry, be polite, be pretty, be better than those people. The neighbors in the apartments down the hill, the single moms we'd pass in the grocery store with 3 kids hanging off the cart. Lord, I don't know why they have so many if they can't afford them, my mother would whisper, loud enough for them to hear. That's not going to be you, Nina. You're going to do it right. Doing it right meant go to college, get a good job, marry a good man, house, ring, then baby, in that order. Everything about our life was arranged to push me down that path. Advanced classes, summer programs, lectures about reputation, if I so much as talked to a boy my parents hadn't personally vetted. You think people don't notice, my father would say if my grades dipped? You think they don't look at us and judge? We had to be twice as good for them to let us in. You don't get to slack. The irony is that they were right about the world's judgment. They just weaponized it against me instead of shielding me from it. When I got pregnant at 24, all of that came crashing down. I can still see the way my mother's face went white, then red. We were at that same dining table, the one with the Christmas runner and the good china in the cabinet behind it. I'd rehearsed the speech in my head all day. I'm pregnant, I said, hands sweating, voice wobbling. Silence. Then my mother's fork clanged against her plate. With who? She demanded. Darius, I said. We've been dating for... I know how long you've been sneaking around with that boy, she snapped. Does he even have a job? He's a mechanic, I said. So he plays with cars and you're having his child. You're going to be a high school statistic, Nina. We did not raise you for this. My parents didn't shout. He rarely did. He just stared at me like I'd walked in and pissed on the rug. You had every opportunity, he said slowly. Every one. And you throw it away on some boy who can't even put on a tie? Have you ever told someone the biggest news of your life and watched them react like you just confessed to a crime? They didn't ask how I felt, didn't ask if I was scared. They went straight to what will people think and who's gonna want you now. Darius panicked and vanished before I even started to show. I can't do this, he'd said on the phone. I'm not ready to be a dad. I wanted to scream, neither am I, but apparently only one of us got to use that as an exit line. My parents' version of support was, you can stay here until the baby comes, but don't expect us to raise it. You got yourself into this, you get yourself out. As if a baby is something you get out of. The one person who didn't treat my pregnancy like a moral failing or a trash fire to be hidden was Alma. My great-grandmother, my mother's grandmother. 90 then, with eyes like she could see straight through your excuses. So, she'd said when I walked into her little brick house on Maple, belly just beginning to show, you're in the family way. I'd nodded, throat tight. I'm sorry, Grandma, I started, because that's the script my parents had handed me. You're having a baby, she interrupted. That's a life. The timing ain't ideal, but life rarely asks your permission before it settles in. You going to do what needs doing. That's what Carter women do. She'd patted the couch beside her. Sit. Tell me about this baby's daddy so I know who to haunt if he don't step up. Have you ever had one person in your bloodline treat your big mistake like a fact, not a verdict? Alma was the one who slipped me an envelope with cash and said, prenatal vitamins ain't cheap. She was the one to come sit by my hospital bed when I gave birth to Zoe, and my mother refused to be in the room because I can't watch my daughter make such a wrong choice. My father'd pace the hallway, checking his watch, leaving to take calls because business doesn't stop because of this. Alma held Zoe first. She looked down at that wrinkled, wailing face and said, well, now you took the scenic route, but you here. Then she looked at me and said, don't let them make you think you ruined your life. It's just a different one than they pictured. My parents never forgave me for that different life. They tolerated Zoe in the way people tolerate a neighbor's loud dog, affection at a distance, annoyance at the inconvenience. They'd invite us up for holidays sometimes, but the invitations were always peppered with little barbs. Please dress appropriately, don't start any scenes, remember there will be important people there. The first few years I tried. I ironed the one nice dress I owned. I made sure Zoe sat still and said please and thank you and didn't spill juice on the white rug. I watched my mother parade her around like a show pony, telling her friends, "This is our granddaughter. Our daughters had some challenges, but this one's turned out all right." As if Zoe arrived fully formed from the sky, not from my body, not from nights I'd spent pacing in a too-hot apartment, wondering how I was going to pay daycare and still eat something that wasn't instant noodles. By the time Zoe was 4, I'd moved out of my parents' guest room into a one-bedroom of my own. It was cramped, the pipes rattled, and the neighbors argued loudly through the walls. It was also mine. I worked the front desk at a dentist's office by day and waited tables at a diner at night, 3 times a week. I stretched every dollar until it squealed. My parents made it clear that this was beneath a Carter. "You could have stayed here," my mother would remind me. "You chose struggle." "I chose not living under your commentary," I'd answer under my breath. Out loud, I'd say, "I'm fine, Mom. I'm making it." "On that salary?" she'd scoff. The first time I married, it was partly to prove her wrong. Darren came into my life like a redemption arc. At least that's how my mother saw it. Nice suits, decent job at a bank, knew which fork to use at fancy dinners. He liked Zoe okay. She adored him because he bought her things my budget couldn't stretch to. My parents were over the moon. "Finally," my mother gushed, "a man who can take care of you." She didn't see the way he'd squeeze my thigh under the table when I said something he thought was inappropriate. She didn't hear the comments at home. "You're lucky I'm willing to take on another man's child. If it weren't for me, you'd still be in that shoebox. You know you're never going to do better than this?" Have you ever been so desperate to stop being the family disappointment that you ignored every sign you were walking into a more dangerous version of the life they said they wanted for you? Alma saw it. Of course she did. One Sunday, sitting on her porch with Zoe playing in the yard, she said, "That man smiles with his teeth, not with his eyes. Be careful, baby." I hadn't listened. It took 3 years and a bruise I had to lie about at work to hear her. I slipped on the stairs, I'd told my boss. My boss had given me the look women give each other when we both know that's not the whole truth. Coming home to find Darren going through my purse, counting the cash from my tip jar, "You don't need to be holding on to this, I'll handle it," was the last straw. I left, packed Zoe's clothes into 2 trash bags while he was out of town, called Alma from the car, and cried until my face hurt. "There's my girl," Alma said. "About time. Come home." Home wasn't my parents' house. It was another too-small apartment, but it was safe. My parents' reaction to me leaving Darren was predictable. "You blew it," my mother said, voice shaking with fury. "Again, you have a pattern, Nina. You're never satisfied. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Finally, we had a decent son-in-law and you drove him off with your attitude." "He hit me," I said flatly. "Maybe if you weren't so mouthy," my father muttered. "Men have limits." Have you ever had the people who taught you don't tolerate disrespect apply that rule only to themselves, not to the man who put his hands on you? They didn't invite me to their house that Christmas. They invited him. "We can't lose him, too," my mother said, as if he and I were equal children she had to choose between. I spent that Christmas alone with Zoe and Alma. It hurt, but it was also peaceful. No tight smiles, no eggshells, just 3 people, 1 little tree, and a lasagna Alma insisted was more festive than turkey. After that, my parents' relationship with Zoe got even more conditional. They wanted Zoe in the family photos, but not me. "We'd love to have Zoe for the weekend," my mother would say, pointedly leaving out "and you." "We're having the pastor over. It would be awkward." I should have said no. I started to. Then I'd look at Zoe's face, lit up at the mention of the big house, the pool, the cousins, the mountain of presents. I'd think about how lonely my own childhood had secretly been, despite all the stuff, and I'd tell myself, she can handle a few passive-aggressive comments if it means she gets to feel included. Alma would frown when I told her. "Your mama loves an audience," she'd say. "Don't let her use that baby as a prop." "It's just a few hours," I'd argue. "I'll pick her up before it gets to them." I was always bargaining, always hoping this time they'd be the grandparents Zoe deserved instead of the parents I got. Have you ever played roulette with your child's emotional safety because you were too scared of becoming the bad guy who cut off family? So when they called about Christmas that year, it was the same script with a sharper edge. "We're hosting the usual," my mother had said on the phone, voice sugary. "Tree, dinner, everyone coming. We'd love to have Zoe." There was a beat. "And me?" I'd asked, even though I knew. "Mina," she sighed, "we've talked about this. You bring tension. You're always ready for a fight. We want peace this year. It would be easier if you didn't come, but Zoe shouldn't miss out because of your choices." I almost said no, right there. The words were at the back of my throat. Then Zoe, overhearing, had whispered, "Grandma's house? Can I see the big tree?" I looked at my daughter, who had no idea how cruel people could be when you didn't meet their expectations yet. I thought, maybe they'd never cross that line with her, not really. My parents may be harsh, but they're not monsters. I underestimated just how little humanity pride leaves you with after a while. That's why, standing in our little living room with wet boot prints on the mat and those damn gift bags cutting into my child's terrified fingers, I knew the door slam wasn't just about this one holiday. My parents had been shutting doors on me my whole life. This was just the first time they'd done it so literally to someone other than me. The difference now was that I had something I didn't have at 16 or 24 or even 27. I had Alma. And my parents had forgotten that no amount of country club membership or house on a hill changed whose name was on the paperwork that made all that possible. Have you ever felt the balance of power in your family shift with one call to the person everyone assumed was just old, but was actually holding all the strings? By the time we turned onto Alma Street, my hands had stopped shaking from rage and started shaking from something else. The awareness that I was about to push a domino I couldn't unpush. Have you ever known that taking the step you need to take is also going to blow up the little bit of stability your family's been clinging to, and you're still not entirely sure you're ready to live with the fallout? Zoe, bundled in the back seat with her stuffed rabbit and the bags of gifts, had drifted off somewhere between our duplex and Maple Street. Her head leaned against the window, mouth slightly open, little snores fogging the glass. The sight of her sleeping always made her look younger to me. Not 10 going on 15 with questions about everything, but the baby I'd held alone in that hospital room while my mother stayed home and ironed tablecloths for the guests. Alma's little brick house came into view, Christmas lights hanging crookedly from the porch, a giant plastic Santa listing to one side. Nothing matched. Nothing was curated. But even from the street, it looked more like home than the museum on the hill ever had. I parked and gently shook Zoe awake. "We're here," I said softly. She blinked, confused for a moment, then remembered. Her shoulders tensed. "Is Grandma here?" "No," I said. "This is great-grandma's house. Different battlefield." She managed a tiny smile at that. It was one of the running jokes between us that visiting my parents was like going into enemy territory. Except this time, the general on our side was waiting on the porch in a bathrobe and slippers. Alma had the door open before we even made it up the walkway. "Took y'all long enough," she grumbled, but her eyes went straight at Zoe. "Come here, sugar." Zoe dropped the bags and ran into her arms. Alma held her so tight I heard her ribs creak. "You cold?" she asked, rubbing her back. "You got all your fingers?" "I'm okay," she mumbled into her shoulder. "Just sad." "We fix sad with food first," she declared, "then with plans." She looked over Zoe's head at me, her gaze like a laser. "You ready for plans, Nina?" "I drove all the way here, didn't I?" My voice sounded braver than I felt. Have you ever stepped into a kitchen and known from the way the pots are already on the stove that the person who called you has been thinking 10 steps ahead of you for years? Alma's kitchen was chaos in the best way. Pots, pans, foil-covered dishes. She'd clearly decided this morning that Christmas was not canceled, just relocated. Macaroni bubbled in one pot, greens simmered in another, a ham sat on the counter, half-glazed, waiting. She'd even dug out the good plates, which in Alma speak meant the chipped floral china she'd inherited from her own mother. "Sit down, both of you," she ordered. "Zoe, you get the first taste because you had the worst day. Nina, you can set the table." Zoe gave me a small, smug look as she slid onto a chair. For a few blessed minutes, things felt almost normal. We ate hot mac and cheese and crispy edges of ham. Zoe told Alma what she got for art supplies. Alma told Zoe about the time she and her sister snuck out of church on Christmas Eve to catch a train. We laughed. We pretended there wasn't a war brewing up on the hill. What I didn't see, at least not right away, was Alma's flip phone sitting next to a yellow legal pad on the counter, a name already scribbled at the top in tight, neat handwriting, Daniels. Have you ever looked back and realized someone was setting up their chessboard long before you even realized there was a game? "All right," Alma said finally, patting her mouth with a napkin. "You done eatin', you warm, time for grown business now." She turned to Zoe. "Sugar, you want to go in the front room and watch that cartoon I taped for you?" "On the VCR?" she asked, eyes lighting up. She loved Alma's ancient tape collection, grainy and glitchy and magical. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "Go on, don't eavesdrop. This is boring lawyer talk." Zoe grabbed her stuffed rabbit and the remote and disappeared into the living room. Alma waited until the sitcom laugh track drowned out our voices, then swiveled back to me. "I called Daniels," she said. "He's coming. You know what that means?" "It means you're about to start a war," I said, "with my parents, on paper." "War started when they sent that child back out into the cold," she snapped. "All I'm doing is making sure the casualties ain't on our side." She pushed the legal pad toward me. I could see notes in her handwriting, dates, dollar amounts, little arrows from my house to their house to trust. Lines like, '03, paid first property tax for them. '07, added them as beneficiaries. 2015, warned them about their attitude. "You been keeping score?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "I ain't God," she said, "but I do keep receipts." She tapped the legal pad. They like to pretend they pulled themselves up, forgetting who gave them the rope. I told them years ago that being on that trust came with expectations, that they treat folks right, that they remember where they came from. They nodded, said all the right things, then they started stepping on necks as soon as they got a little cushion. She leaned back, eyes narrowing. "I let it slide when they looked down on your neighbors. I let it slide when your mama made snide comments about those people on the bus. I let it slide when they introduced you as our troubled one in front of company." "Grandma, I never expected you to—" "Hush," she said, but there was a softness under it. "I'm the one who's been wrong letting it slide this long. I made excuses 'cause they're my babies too, but everybody got a line. They just crossed mine." Have you ever watched a woman who survived almost a century finally reach the limit of her tolerance, not for hardship, but for cruelty from her own blood? "What exactly are you going to do?" I asked, eyeing where Zoe was sprawled on the carpet in the next room, her laugh rising over the TV. "I'm gonna change my mind," she said simply, "on paper." She opened a drawer, pulled out a thick binder labeled Trust in big black letters. Inside were tabs, color-coded, dates written on Post-its. This was not a woman who'd left her affairs to chance. When your granddaddy died, she began, we was about to lose the house. Factory job gone, bills piling up. Bankman tried to tell me I should just sell, take the little I'd get and move into some cheap apartment. I told him, sir, I did not spend 30 years sewing buttons back onto rich folks' shirts for you to tell me when I'm done with the roof over my head. She grinned, remembering. Then I went to a different bank, found a different man. He helped me set up this. She tapped the binder. Carter Family Trust. Fancy name for Alma's pot of money. I put the house in it, put what little savings I had. Later, when your mama married well and your uncle got promoted, I put some of their extra in here. I said, we gon' pool this, grow this, and I'll make sure nobody ends up in the street. That was generous, I said. It was strategic, she corrected. I ain't let them be owners. I let them be beneficiaries. That means they get what I say they get when I say they get it. I pay their property tax directly out of this. I pay for that church plaque your mama likes to point at. I cover their HOA fines when they forget to paint the fence. But I always kept the power. She looked at me over the rims of her glasses. Power without purpose don't mean nothing. Today, I'm going to use it. Have you ever had your understanding of rich completely rearranged, not as a number of zeros, but as the ability to say enough and have that word echo through someone else's life? We didn't have long to wait. Daniels arrived within half an hour, shaking snow off his coat as he stepped into Elma's kitchen. Merry Christmas, he said dryly, setting his briefcase on the table. Merry whatever, she said. You want coffee, tea, revenge? He chuckled. Let's start with coffee and trust amendments. Then we'll see about the rest. He glanced at me. You must be Nina? Yes, sir, I said. Thank you for coming today. Well, he flipped open the binder Alma had shoved at him. From what she told me, it sounded urgent. He scanned the notes, the tabs, the existing provisions. You've been thorough, as always, Alma. What did you have in mind? I want to remove my daughter and her husband as remainder beneficiaries, she said. They can live in that house till I'm gone, but no more gravy, no checks. When I die, I want that house and everything left in this pot to go to Nina and Zoe. He raised an eyebrow. That's a substantial change. So was them telling a child she ain't welcome in a house I paid for. Can we do it or not? We can, he said. Legally, you're of sound mind and you've retained full control. But there will be backlash. They may challenge it. Let 'em try, Alma said. They gonna have to get through me first, then through you. Nina, she added, turning to me, you ready for that? Have you ever had someone hand you a loaded decision like a weapon and ask you if you're truly willing to pull the trigger? I took a breath. It's your money, Grandma, I said. You don't owe me or them anything. If this is what you want, this ain't just about what I want, she snapped. It's about what's right. You think I'm doing this because I like you better? I love all my babies, even the foolish ones. But some of y'all show you can be trusted. Some don't. I'm old, not stupid. I nodded slowly. Then, yes, I said, I'm ready. Ready didn't mean not afraid. Part of me, the child part, still cringed at the thought of my parents' faces when they found out. The rational part knew they'd already chosen their side by choosing to hurt my daughter. Alma was just choosing hers now. Daniels opened his briefcase, pulled out his laptop, and started typing. He dictated as he went, legalese rolling off his tongue. Amendment to Article 4. Upon the grantor's death, all real property currently held in the Carter Family Trust shall pass in fee simple to Nina Brooks to be held in further trust for the benefit of her daughter Zoe Brooks until Zoe attains the age of 25. The words washed over me in waves. I wasn't thinking about inheritances. I was thinking about Zoe in the next room, the way her face had crumpled when she'd said, Grandma said we're not family this year. I was thinking, if my parents can slam a door in her face over pride, what would they do if Alma wasn't here to check them? Sell the house and cut us out of the story completely, that's what. Have you ever realized that sometimes the only way to protect your child from the future is to go back and rewire the past? Names on documents, lines in wills, assumptions about who deserves what. Within an hour, the amendments were drafted. Alma signed with a steady hand, her signature looping, practiced. Daniels notarized them, slid copies into envelopes. "I'll send these to the county and send courtesy copies to your daughter's attorney," he said. "But given the personal nature of this, I suspect you may want to tell them yourself." Alma's mouth twisted. "Oh, I plan to," she said. "I want to see they faces when they realize the gravy bout just tipped." She turned to me. "You coming?" "Do you want me to?" I asked. "This might be better." "You started this by calling me," she said. "Rightly so. You finishing it by standing there while I do what you've been too scared to ask me for. This ain't just my fight, it's ours." Have you ever been invited into a battle by someone who spent your whole life telling you to duck and realized that maybe they'd just been waiting for you to stand up next to them? Zoe poked her head in from the living room, sensing the shift. "Where are you going?" she asked, eyes flicking between our serious faces. "Great-Grandma and I have to go drop off some papers," I said, forcing a smile. "You're staying here with Miss Carla for a little bit. We'll be back soon." Her brow wrinkled. "To Grandma's?" she asked. "To Great-Grandma's grandma," Alma said. "Some people need reminding who they came from." Zoe looked like she wanted to ask more, but Carla from next door, who Alma must have recruited via one of her mysterious phone calls, appeared with a tray of cookies and an exaggerated gasp. "Are those sugar sprinkles?" she cried, distracting Zoe long enough for us to slip out. Have you ever closed a door behind you knowing you were walking straight into a confrontation, but for once, you weren't the one doing it empty-handed? We got into my car. Alma insisted on sitting up front, buckling herself in with theatrical grumbling about these newfangled straps. Daniels followed in his sedan. I pulled away from the curb, the little brick house shrinking in the rear view, the big house on the hill looming in my mind. But this time, as we drove, I didn't feel like a teenager going to face judgment. I felt like a woman coming to present a bill. "You nervous?" Alma asked, eyeing me sidelong. "Terrified," I admitted, "but also done." She nodded. "Fear don't mean you're wrong," she said. "It just mean you're stepping into something new. Your mama been running this family off fear for too long. Time she get a taste of it from the other side." The road to my parents' neighborhood wound upward. Houses getting bigger, decorations getting more elaborate. By the time we turned onto their street, it looked like a catalog. Perfectly placed wreaths, matching LED lights, inflatable snowmen that didn't sag. No one would ever guess that behind the doors of one of those houses lived people who'd told their own granddaughter to take your presents back where you came from. That's the thing about pretty neighborhoods. They hide a lot. Have you ever driven past places you once envied and realized that the brick and paint don't tell you anything about the people inside? I parked at the curb. Alma adjusted her robe, smoothed her hair, squared her shoulders. For the first time, I noticed she was wearing her good slippers, the ones with the firm soles. Battle shoes, I guess. "Ready?" I asked. "Been ready," she said, opening the door. "They the ones about to find out this ain't just their show." We stepped out into the cold, Daniels joining us on the walkway, manila envelope in hand. My parents had no idea what was walking up to their door. For years, they thought a 10-year-old's knock was beneath their notice. See how they like the sound of a 92-year-old cane and a lawyer's shoes on their perfect stone path. My parents' house looked exactly the way it always did at Christmas, like a magazine spread. Every bush wrapped in white lights, a perfectly symmetrical wreath on the door, 2 nutcracker statues flanking the steps like silent guards. Through the front window, I could see the shapes moving around. Cousins in their holiday best, my uncle with a drink in his hand, my mother, no doubt, directing everything from the center like an orchestra conductor. Have you ever walked up to a place that once defined success for you and felt, instead of longing, almost a painful clarity about how much it has taken from you? Alma tapped her cane against the stone walkway with each step. Tap, 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 like a countdown. Daniels walked slightly behind us, briefcase in one hand, the envelope with the amended trust in the other. I was in the middle, heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. For a sliver of a second, the little girl in me wanted to turn around, get back in the car, drive away, and pretend I loved my parents too much to do this. But then I saw again in my mind Zoe's red nose, the way her voice had cracked when she said, "Grandma said we're not family this year." And I kept walking. I rang the doorbell. It played that obnoxious little chime my mother loved, some classical snippet, she said, added class to the entrance. Footsteps approached. The door opened, warm air and the smell of turkey and cinnamon pouring out like the house was exhaling smugness. My mother stood framed in the doorway in a deep green dress, pearls at her neck, hair perfectly pressed. For a moment, she didn't register what she was looking at. Her eyes went straight past Alma's shoulders, scanning the porch for a small figure in a red coat. When she saw only us, me, Alma, and a man in a suit, her face hardened like a door slamming. "Oh," she said, lips thinning, "it's you." "Merry Christmas to you too, baby girl," Alma said, voice sugar-sweet and knife-sharp underneath. My mother's gaze flicked to Daniel's, taking in the briefcase, the envelope, the air of professional trouble. Her expression faltered. "What is this?" she demanded. My father appeared behind her, tying the belt of his expensive robe tighter around his waist. He looked like a man who'd just been interrupted mid-boast. "Ma," he said, surprised, "why didn't you call before coming? We could have sent a car." "Didn't need a car," Alma said. "Needed my legs and my lawyer." She jerked her cane at Daniels. "This is Mr. Daniels. You remember him. You like to forget who he is when it's convenient, but you remember him when you want an advance." My father flushed. "Now is not the time for this," he said. "We have guests. It's Christmas." "Exactly," Alma said. "And on Christmas, you turned my great-grandbaby away in the cold. We're right on time." Have you ever seen people who are used to controlling the room realize in real time that they have no control over what's about to be said on their own porch? My mother straightened, grasping for the script she knew. "This is not a conversation for the front steps," she hissed. "Come inside. We ain't going nowhere," Alma interrupted. "You like to do your dirt behind closed doors. This conversation happening right here where God, the neighbors, and that plastic Santa can hear every word." I almost choked on a laugh. Even in fury, Alma had timing. Daniel stepped forward, ever so slightly. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he began, voice calm. "My name is Charles Daniels, counsel for Mrs. Alma Carter. I'm here to deliver some documents regarding a change to the Carter Family Trust." My mother frowned. "Change?" she repeated, suspicion dawning. "What kind of change?" "Effective today," Daniel said, holding out the envelope, "Mrs. Carter has executed an amendment removing you as remainder beneficiaries and suspending discretionary distributions made for your benefit, including property tax payments, HOA fees, and certain other support." For a second, no one breathed. My mother stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "You can't be serious," she said finally, voice going shrill. "You're cutting us off? At your age? Who put you up to this?" Her eyes darted to me then, sharp as darts. There it was, the accusation she'd been rehearsing since before she even knew what was happening. "You did this," she spat. "You finally poisoned her against us." "Watch your mouth," Alma said quietly. That tone made even I stand up straighter. "Ain't nobody poisoned me." She pointed her cane at my mother, then my father. "Watching you act like you built this house with your bare hands. Watching you act like you did me a favor visiting once a week. Watching you talk slick about your own daughter like you wasn't any better off at her age." Her gaze sharpened further. "I let a lot slide, 'cause y'all's mama is my baby, and sometimes I forget babies grow up wrong, but I will not stand for you turning that ugliness on a child." My father tried to step in. "Ma, you're overreacting," he said, doing that calm, patronizing thing he always did when someone threatened his sense of control. "We simply set a boundary. Nina is disrespectful. We told her she wasn't welcome if she can't act right. It's reasonable to expect." "We are talking about Zoe," I cut in, my voice suddenly clear, standing taller. "Your granddaughter, who you asked to come, who you watched walk up that driveway with bags of gifts and hope, and then told her to go back where she came from because I didn't come with her?" We did not tell her that, my mother snapped defensively. We told her that her mother's behavior has consequences. You told a 10-year-old, I repeated slowly, like I was explaining basic math, that she is not family without me. You said that with your eyes, with that door, with that lock. I could see it hit my father then. Not empathy, but fear. The understanding that what had felt like a moment of righteous indignation might have bigger ripples. You can't prove anything, he weakly said. It's hearsay. It's my word against yours, I shot back, and I trust my child. Have you ever tasted the bitter satisfaction of throwing a line your parents used on you as a teenager, now that you're grown and holding truth in your hands? Daniels cleared his throat, smoothing the situation back into legalese. Whether we can prove the exact words said at your door is not the point today. The point is Mrs. Carter has decided that, in light of your conduct, she does not wish you to be the primary beneficiaries of the trust she established. That is her legal right. These documents formalize that. He extended the envelope again. This time, my father took it, fingers trembling. He started flipping through the pages, eyes scanning lines he clearly didn't fully understand, but could feel the weight of them. You can't just cut us out, my mother said, and now there was something like panic edging into her voice. We've built our lives around my money, Alma finished. You're right. I can't just cut you out. Not legally. She smiled, all teeth. I can change where it goes when I'm gone. I can stop the extra handout. You still get to live here till I transition, 'cause I ain't cruel enough to make them babies homeless when I know you ain't saved for nothing 'cause you assumed my checks would never stop. Her gaze hardened. But the days of you calling this your house like you built it without help? Over. My mother's eyes filled with angry tears. How could you do this to us? She demanded. After everything we've done for you? We check on you. We take you to the doctor. You do the bare minimum a decent child should do. And you do it with an attitude, acting like every ride to the grocery store buys you another year of ignoring who put you in that position in the first place. She jabbed her cane at the porch beneath us. Your husband didn't build this alone. My John worked himself to the bone to hold on to this land when folks told us it wasn't ours to own. I worked double shifts. I put this in a trust so none of y'all ended up on the street, not so you could lord it over everybody else. She stepped closer, so close I thought she might actually smack my mother with the cane. You had one job, Denise. Be better. Treat folks right, especially little ones. You failed. I'm just marking it on the ledger. Have you ever watched the person your parents fear most finally aim that fear at them, not at you? It was like watching a scene flip inside out. All my life, my parents had told me not to upset Alma. Don't get her worked up. Don't stress her. They'd use her as a reason to shut me up, to keep me in line. You'll give Grandma a heart attack with your antics. But Grandma was not the fragile one. She was the one everyone else had propped their trophies on, and now she was using that same power to smack those trophies right off the shelf. This is about Zoe, Daniel said, smoothing the situation back into legalese. Mrs. Carter wants to ensure that her great-granddaughter's welfare is prioritized. By redirecting future assets to Nina and Zoe, she is aligning her estate plan. Your values, my mother repeated, voice dripping sarcasm. Since when do you care about values? You didn't say a word when Nina threw her life away, twice. She turned to me then, fury overriding fear. You always wanted to be the victim, Nina. Look what you've done. Our entire retirement. Your retirement, I interrupted, is never been my job or my daughter's. That stopped her. Even my father's mouth fell a little open. I'd never talked back in front of other adults, especially in front of Alma and a lawyer. I could feel the weight of years of deference cracking off my shoulders like ice. Have you ever said something to your parents you'd practiced 1,000 times in your head and realized the second the words left your mouth that there was no going back? I continued. I'm not the one who made your life be about checks from Grandma. I didn't make you build your image on money that wasn't entirely yours. I didn't make you treat me like an embarrassment and Zoe like a photo prop. You did that. All I did was stop covering covering for it. I glanced at Daniels. And Alma? She just stopped paying for it. My mother's lip quivered. For a second, I saw not the perfectly poised woman who'd policed my every move, but a little girl whose own mother probably had her own cane, her own ledger of grudges. "You're gonna turn my own grandmother against me," she whispered, "on Christmas." "You did that yourself," Alma said kindly, which somehow stung more. "I'm just the old lady with a pen." My father finally spoke up again, voice thick. "Ma, think about what you're doing," he pleaded. "We counted on this. You should have counted on yourselves," she cut in. "You had every advantage I never did. Good jobs, a paid-off house, health. Y'all could have saved, invested on your own. Instead, you spent like the party would never end because you knew Grandma was footing the stuff that really mattered." She shook her head. "Party's not over. I ain't throwing you out. You still my child. But consider this last call." Daniels cleared his throat, bringing us back to procedure. "I'll be filing these amendments with the court after the holiday. Your attorney will receive a copy. If you have questions, direct them to him. Mrs. Carter has made her decision. It's final." My mother stared at the envelope in my father's hands like it might sprout teeth. "We won't forget this," she said, voice low, dangerous. She looked at me when she said it, not Alma. "You think you've won something. You've just made sure you'll never be welcome in this family again." "You already made that clear," I said softly, "when you told my daughter she wasn't family without me." Have you ever realized that the threat your parents hold over your head, exile, disownment, isn't actually a threat anymore once you've already been living without their approval? We turned to go. Alma's cane clicked on the stone, Daniel's shoes crunched on the salted steps. Behind us, I heard my mother hiss, "We'll sue." Alma didn't bother turning around. She called over her shoulder, "You can try, but Daniels writes better English than any of the lawyers you can afford now." I almost felt bad for laughing. But then I pictured Zoe's pink hands gripping those gift bags, and the guilt evaporated. Have you ever watched the beginning of someone's unraveling and felt not glee, but a deep, tired sense of balance finally reasserting itself? We drove back to Alma's house, in silence at first. Then she reached over, patted my knee. "You did good," she said. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "You did." "You called me," she corrected. "You could have called your mama to scream. You called me to act. That counts." She paused. "You ready for what comes next?" "The screaming?" I asked. "The rewriting," she said. "They about to spin this story so many ways, make you the villain, make me senile. But you remember what really happened today. Girl, your great-grandbaby gonna remember who opened the right door. That's what matters." Have you ever had someone older tell you that your job isn't to manage how everyone tells the story, just to make sure your child knows the truth? We pulled up to Alma's little brick house as the sun started to dip, the sky bleeding orange and pink. Inside, Zoe was waiting at the window, nose pressed to the glass, bunny tucked under her arm. When she saw us, she bounced. "You're back!" she shouted as we walked in. "Did you yell at Grandma?" "No, sugar," Alma said, shrugging off her coat. "We talked grown. Grown talk louder than yellin' when the right ear's listenin'." Zoe frowned, confused, but let it go in favor of begging for more mac and cheese. I looked at her, safe and warm in that cramped little living room, and thought, my parents' lives are unraveling. Maybe mine will be too, in some ways. But hers was finally being stitched together with hands that knew how to mend. The thing about dropping a bomb in a family isn't the explosion itself. It's the way the smoke lingers in all the corners you forgot existed. Have you ever done the right thing and then, in the quiet after, felt a little sick, wondering what parts of your old life just died with it? Back at Alma's, Zoe was blissfully unaware of the legal grenades we'd just lobbed up the hill. She was sprawled on the living room floor, her art set open, drawing a lopsided Christmas tree with way too many presents under it. Alma had turned the TV back to her favorite soap opera. The volume low, eyes half closed, but ears still perked like a cat. The little house seemed to sigh as we walked in. Warm, crowded, alive. "Everything go how you wanted?" Alma asked, without looking at me, as I hung up my coat. "Depends what wanted means," I said, dropping into the chair opposite her. She cracked one eye open. "Guilt is yo mama's favorite seasoning," she said. "She sprinkle it on everything. Don't you start doing it for her." Have you ever realized you've been marinating in someone else's guilt recipe for so long that even justice tastes wrong at first? My phone buzzed on the table between us. Mom. For a second, my thumb twitched toward decline. Then I thought about Zoe, about the story that get told if I never answered. She turned Grandma against us, then ran. I took a breath and swiped to accept. "Hi, Mom," I said evenly. "Merry Christmas." "Don't you start with that fake polite tone," she snapped. "I just had a lawyer call me on Christmas. I have guests here, Nina. They're asking questions. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" There it was. Not, "I'm sorry for what I said to Zoe." Not, "Is she okay?" Just, "I'm humiliated." "I have some idea," I said. "I watched your granddaughter walk home alone in the snow with presents you refused to take. That was pretty humiliating." "You twisted Grandma against us," she said. "She's old, Nina. You took advantage of her, told her some sob story about a child being cold." "That child is your granddaughter," I cut in, "and Zoe didn't tell a sob story. She told the truth." I could hear voices in the background on her end, muffled, curious, the clink of dishes. Somewhere, a cousin's kid laughing too loud until someone shushed them. Life going on for them like they hadn't just shattered my daughter's heart. "You know what bothers me the most?" my mother said. "The way you went behind our backs. You always do this. You don't talk to us. You go run to someone else, make us look like monsters." "You don't need my help for that," I said before I could stop myself. Years of biting my tongue frayed in an instant. She sucked in a breath. "If we set boundaries with you, that's our right," she said, voice icy. "You're disrespectful. You left two good men. You refused to take accountability. Now you're using Zoe as a pawn to get Grandma's money." "I never asked Alma for a cent," I said. "I called her because you hurt her great-grandchild. She used the tools she had to respond. That's between you and her. I didn't sign her checks before this, and I'm not signing them now." "You stood there," she hissed, "on our porch, smirking, acting like you finally got one over on us." Have you ever realized someone is so used to seeing you as their enemy that they can't imagine you doing anything for any reason other than revenge? I rubbed my temple. "I stood there," I said slowly, choosing each word, "because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the only one being told I'd done something wrong. I stood there because I wanted to see you have to listen to someone besides yourselves." She was quiet for a beat. When she spoke again, her voice was wobbling in a way I'd rarely heard. "We took you in," she said, "when you got pregnant, when you made bad choices. We fed you. We gave you a roof." "You reminded me of it every day," I said. "You held it over my head like a leash." "That's gratitude?" she demanded. "Gratitude doesn't mean endless submission. It doesn't mean I let you talk to my child like she's dirt so you can feel better about yourselves." The line crackled. I could picture her twisting the phone cord around her fingers, the way she used to do when she was anxious. "So that's it," she said. "You're going to turn Zoe against us, make us out to be villains?" "Zoe is not stupid," I said. "She knows who opened the door and who shut it. I don't have to say a word to turn her. You did that yourself." "We disciplined her," my mother insisted. "She needs to learn actions have consequences." She's 10, I said. The only action she took was walking up to your house when you invited her. The only consequence she should have had was too much pie. You made her feel like she was disposable. That's not discipline. That's cruelty. Have you ever heard your own voice lay out your childhood in someone else's present and realized you finally believe yourself more than you fear the person you're talking to? There was another pause. When my mother spoke again, she shifted tact. You think Grandma is going to live forever? She asked. You think this money train you just jumped onto is guaranteed? What happens when she changes her mind back? Or when she dies and your uncle fights you for it? You're building your future on a 92-year-old's temper tantrum. I'm not building anything on her money, I said. I've been living without it this long. I'll keep doing that. This isn't about inheritance. It's about someone finally telling you no in a way you can't ignore. I exhaled slowly. Here's what's going to happen, Mom. Forward, if you want to see Zoe, it'll be on my terms, in public places, with me present. You don't get to have alone time with her until you earn back that trust. You don't have to like it, but that's what it is. You can't dictate. I can. I'm her mother, not you, not Alma, not the church, me. And my job is to protect her, even if that means protecting her from you. Silence fell heavy. When she spoke again, her voice had gone cold, the way it did when she was done arguing and decided to punish with distance. Fine, she said. Do whatever you want, but don't come asking for help when Grandma's not around to clean up your messes anymore. I haven't asked you for help in years, I said, and somehow we're still standing. We'll see how long that lasts, she snapped, then hung up. Have you ever ended a call and realized that for the first time, the weight you felt wasn't because you'd been guilted into submission, but because you'd finally let the bridge burn instead of setting yourself on fire to keep it? I stared at the phone for a minute, then set it down. Alma was watching me over the rim of her mug. She mad? She asked. She's my mother, I said. She's been mad since '92. Alma cackled. She'll live, she said. They always do. Being angry is a cardio workout for folks like her. Sure this was right? I asked, all my bravado gone. I mean, I know it felt right for Zoe, but for you, they're your kids. You just made their lives harder. I made their lives honest, she corrected. They've been living on a lie that money means they better, that my help is a right, not a gift. You can't fix what you won't face. She reached across the table, a surprisingly firm hand closing over mine. When I go, I want to know that my money is going towards somebody who remembers why I worked for it. That child in there, she gonna remember. You will too. That's enough. Have you ever realized that someone is counting on you not to be perfect, but just to remember what pain taught you and refuse to pass it down? The next few weeks proved Alma and Daniel's right about one thing. My parents were not going to take this lying down. Within days, my father was on the phone with Daniels, blustering about unfair influence and elder abuse. Daniels shut that down quickly. We had her evaluated last year, he reminded them. She's of sound mind. You know that because you signed off on her making medical decisions for herself. You can consult your own counsel, but any competent attorney will tell you the same thing. They did consult their own counsel. I know because my uncle called me, hissing with, "What did you do?" into the phone, like I'd stolen state secrets. Mom changed her will, not me, I said. Maybe ask her what pushed her there. He grumbled about being caught in the middle, but I noticed he didn't exactly rush to my parents' defense either. Alma had helped him buy his little house too. He knew which side of the ledger he stood on financially. Meanwhile, bills started arriving at my parents' house without the usual magical disappearance. Property tax notices, HOA fees, a letter from the church treasurer gently noting that their usual generous donation hadn't come through this quarter. Their lifestyle, which had always looked solid from the outside, began to wobble. My mother cut back on some of her social media posting, fewer photos from fancy restaurants, more from memories and throwbacks. They started skipping little luxuries. No new car that year, no big beach vacation. To the outside world, it probably looked like nothing, but I heard it in the edge in her voice when she called my uncle. Things are tight right now. Now you know how Nina's been living this whole time, I heard Alma mutter once, the phone not quite covering the receiver. Welcome to the party. Have you ever watched people who always seemed untouchable finally feel the basic financial stress you've been carrying for years and had to check yourself not to enjoy it too much? The important part wasn't their discomfort. It was the way it shifted the power dynamic just enough that when conversations about Zoe came up, they listened more. Not because they'd suddenly grown a conscience, but because they'd finally realized there were real-world consequences to crossing certain lines. "We'd like to see Zoe," my father said stiffly on a call a couple of months later. "Her birthday is coming up." I took a slow breath. I said, "We can meet at the park on Saturday from 2 to 4. I'll be there the whole time. If either of you say anything negative about me to her or try to justify what happened at Christmas, the visit ends. Do you understand?" He bristled. "You don't get to dictate." "I do," I said. "The judge of your bank account already made her ruling. This one's mine." There was a long pause. Then, grudgingly, "Fine." Have you ever gotten a fine from someone who has never conceded anything in their life and felt it like a medal pinned silently to your chest? At the park, Zoe was nervous at first. She clung to my hand as we walked up to the bench where my parents sat, too stiff in their nice coats for a playground. My mother pasted on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zoe, baby," she cooed, arms outstretched. Zoe glanced up at me. I squeezed her hand and nodded. "You can hug her," I murmured, "if you want to." She did, but it was quick, light, not the full, trusting dive she used to give them as a toddler. My father gave her an awkward pat on the head. "Hey, kiddo, how's school?" They made small talk, asked about her favorite subjects, her friends, brought a small gift, a book, which, to their credit, was something she actually liked. They did not mention Christmas. They did not say family. At one point, my mother started to say, "You know Grandma didn't mean," and caught my expression. She shut her mouth. Someone was finally reading the room. Have you ever watched people attempt to rebuild a bridge they themselves burned and felt both cold satisfaction and unexpected sadness? Because here's the thing. I didn't want Zoe to grow up hating her grandparents. I just wanted her to know in her bones that love is supposed to open doors, not slam them. That money doesn't excuse cruelty. That you can forgive people without giving them the power to hurt you again in the same way. That Christmas on the porch wasn't just about a trust and a house. It was about reteaching all of us, me, my parents, Zoe, what family actually means. And sometimes the only way to do that is to let the people who abuse the title feel what it's like to lose some of the privileges that came with it. Have you ever understood for the first time that justice and revenge are not always the same thing, even when they use some of the same tools? By the time the next Christmas rolled around, our lives looked different in ways both big and small. My parents still lived in their big house on the hill, but the shine had dulled. The reindeer in the yard were a little more faded. The light display was less elaborate. Fewer hired decorators, more my father teetering on a ladder with a staple gun. Their parties were smaller, too. Fewer work colleagues, more extended family who couldn't care less about how many zeros were on anyone's checks, as long as there was food and somewhere to sit. A couple of the old guard still came, though. The pastor, aunties who'd known my mother since her Scrubs days. I heard through the grapevine that more than one had pulled her aside after hearing about the Zoe situation and said, "Now, Denise, that wasn't right." She didn't like that. She liked judgment in one direction. Meanwhile, down in our little duplex, there were more boxes stacked by the door than there were the year before, but they were mostly from thrift stores and discount chains, not high-end boutiques. Zoe and I had spent December baking cookies for her classmates, watching old movies with Alma, making paper snowflakes to tape to the windows. Our holiday budget was stretched, but it was honest. On Christmas Eve, like clockwork now, we went to Alma's. This time, though, it wasn't out of crisis. It was tradition. Zoe no longer asked about going up the hill first. She asked, "What time are we going to Great-Grandma's?" Like that was the center of gravity. Which, in a way, it was. Alma's health had started to wobble a bit. Her steps were slower, her naps longer, but her mind still sharp enough to slice bread. "This might be my last big one," she said, matter-of-factly, stirring a pot of greens. "You don't say that," I objected automatically. She gave me a look. "I'm old, not immortal," she said. "We don't do pretending in this house. That's them department." She nodded vaguely uphill. Zoe was old enough now to catch the subtext. Her eyes dimmed for a second. Then she stepped closer to Alma and hugged her around the waist. "I'll still dry you Christmas pictures," she said, "even if you're in heaven." "Good," Alma said, patting her head. "Mail up there is slow, but I'll get 'em." Have you ever watched your child accept the idea of loss with more grace than most adults and thought, maybe she'll break fewer things than we did? We ate, we laughed. Alma told stories about long ago Christmases when her own kids were little and all they could afford was an orange and a homemade doll, but they felt like kings anyway. She told Zoe about the first time she saw snow, about the time my mother got coal in her stocking because she mouthed off to your granddaddy, just like she does now. Zoe listened, eyes big, taking in a version of our family history that didn't start and end with my parents' curated narrative. In the middle of it, Alma pulled a small, wrapped box from under her tree. "This one's for you," she said, handing it to me. "Grandma, I told you not to—" "Hush," she said. "You like making rules for yourself. Let somebody else break 'em sometimes." Inside was a simple gold necklace. Nothing flashy, a small pendant in the shape of a key. "It's from my mama," she said. "She left it to you. I'm leaving it to you. Consider it my official passing of the door opener torch." I ran my thumb over the smooth metal, throat tight. "I don't know if I can fill your shoes," I admitted. "You're not supposed to," she said. "Shoes that old ain't made for young feet. You walk how you walk. Just don't forget what you saw this year. Don't forget what you did." Have you ever had someone older and trust you with something that isn't about money, but about a role, the quiet, heavy responsibility of being the one who finally says no more when everyone else is stuck on, "This is just how it is"? Later, when we were back home, Zoe and I curled up on the couch in matching pajamas. Our tree was a little fuller this year thanks to some overtime hours and a small, unexpected bonus at work, but it still wasn't anything my parents would brag about. To us, it was perfect. "Remember last year?" Zoe asked, suddenly, unexpected. I stiffened. "Yeah," I said. "I remember." "I don't think about it as much now," she admitted. "Sometimes I do, when we drive past their street, but mostly I remember how Alma hugged me and the mac and cheese." She grinned. "And how Grandma got in trouble." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "How do you feel about them now?" I asked carefully. "Grandma and Grandpa?" She shrugged. "They're okay sometimes. They're nice when we see them at the park. They don't talk mean about you anymore. I like Grandpa's stories. I don't like their house as much. It's too quiet." She frowned, searching for the word. "Too pretending." Pretending. Yeah, that's a good word for it. "I like our house better," she said, laying her head on my shoulder. "And Grandma's. They feel real." Have you ever heard your child casually sort the adults in their life into pretend and real, and felt a mix of sorrow for the ones on the wrong list and relief that your kid can tell the difference? That night, when she was asleep, I stood at the window and looked up the hill. I could faintly see the glow of my parents' house in the distance. I wondered what their Christmas had been like. Quieter, a little more tense, maybe a little more honest. As much as part of me still ached for the version of them I'd always wished I had, ones who could look at my daughter and see their legacy instead of my mistakes, another part of me was strangely at peace. I had stopped asking people who couldn't love me well to prove they could love my child better. I had stopped shoving Zoe towards a door hoping they'd behave when everything in their history suggested they wouldn't. I had stopped letting their money dictate who got to feel like real family. And yes, Alma's legal maneuvering had made all of that easier, because when people showed you they cared more about status than flesh and blood, hitting them where they felt it was sometimes the only language they understood. But even if there hadn't been a trust, even if there hadn't been a house or a lawyer or an amendment, I could see now that the most important thing that shifted wasn't on paper. It was me. Have you ever felt your backbone grow a few inches without your height changing at all? I realized I was no longer the teenager teetering around my parents' moods. I was a woman who survived single motherhood, 2 bad relationships, and a lifetime of being the black sheep. And I had a daughter who was watching my every move, quietly taking notes on what love looks like, what respect feels like, and what you are and aren't allowed to accept from people who claim to care about you. That mattered more than any cutoff check from a trust.